create a print queue in the Enterprise Output Management server, we simply find a queue that's most like the one we want to create, and we right-click on that queue, select Admin, copy. This queue is currently pointing to an IP address of a physical device. We would put in our new IP address of the device, and we would rename the printer to the new name. This VPSX ID refers to your VPSX server. If you have multiple servers in your environment, you still only want to create this print queue on your main server so the changes can replicate. I would change my long name here to reflect whatever this printer is, and my printer group, I would change that if I needed to. As you can see, all the settings from the previous print queue have been carried over, including the driver and my checkboxes here, mobile print and pull print. If this, for instance, was a color printer, I would want to check this box and modify any other settings and click Add. Now what I'm looking at is every line on this console is another print device, generally speaking. So every queue in here is a one-to-one relationship with a physical device. However, it doesn't have to be. For instance, if I look at this queue, for testing purposes, I actually have this queue pointing back to the server on an LPD port to the null queue. Now we can go back and look at that. I can type the name of the print queue I was just on and the null queue at the same time, space separated, and I'll get multiple filters here showing up. It's kind of nice. On my null queue, I simply have this queue on hold. As you can see here under Advanced, I have Hold All Jobs selected. Let's find a queue here with some jobs in it. We can go back to the null queue. Now, as you can see, under queued here, there's 14 jobs. Retained is 0. Queued is jobs submitted, and retained is jobs that have actually printed. I can manipulate those jobs very easily. I click on the number here for the jobs, and I'm looking at all the jobs in the queue. I have a lot of options when I right-click the job. I can actually look at the job itself. I can open up that job in either Notepad or a PCL viewer if the data type is PCL. Some of these are going to be PDF or whatever the case they are. You can double-click them and open them up and look at them. I can download that job. You see all my options here. If I modify the job, I can just modify some metadata, some attributes about that job. I can release and reroute. Those are the two main options I might be concerned about. So if I release that job, say for instance this job was held in an error state, I could release that job to try and print it again. If I was in my retain queue instead of my output queue, I could release that job and it would do a reprint. It would print that job again. Reroute, I can click reroute and send it to a different printer. Say for instance my printer is down and I'm a user, I call the help desk. I can then reroute, the help desk can then reroute the job for that user to the new device. I can also modify my view that I'm looking at here. Under my columns, I can add or remove any information I'd like, depending on what my task is as a print administrator in the console. There are some options here to add secure print or pull print items, some secure scan. Now what we want to note here is if I'm looking at an actual print queue, this COM type here that I'm creating, or I'm sorry, that I'm selecting, is referring to how the server is going to communicate with the print device, not how the client submits the print job. That's a completely different setting in a different area, and we'll talk about that in our Windows drivers video that we'll do later. Suffice it to say, this print server communicates with the actual physical printer via this communication type. Generally, we're going to use PJL. That's the most robust communication back and forth. Sockets being the next one down for a little less communication back and forth, and then LPD. Actually, no communication back. We just fire and forget. Now we obviously have IPP and IPPS. Those are internet printing protocols. No problem using those. However, we find that PJL is the most reliable when the printer can speak PJL successfully. in an environment that you want end-to-end encryption, we would need the IPPS COM type, and we would need to set up certificates and chain of authority on the server itself to successfully communicate with that printer. And then obviously the certificate on the printer itself should be defined. If we want to change the printer where it's printing, in other words, divert that printer, so if a user submits a job and we want the job to automatically reroute to another printer, we would use divert. We would type in our alternate printer, click the divert box, and then for the divert reason, we generally want to put in a help desk ticket number or a phone number or some information that would lead anybody else looking at this to understand why this was diverted. For notifications about print queues in error state, we can click on our mail section here and fill out all of these fields to go to some sort of admin distribution group or individual, and we can click down here to say how we want to be notified and what state we want the printer to be in for the notifications to be triggered. For many environments, SNMP version 1 is being disabled due to the security limitations. We fully support SNMP version 3. Please see the SNMP section here and fill out everything pertinent to your organization, and the printer will successfully communicate via SNMP version 3. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.